At my brother's college party, Dad said, "He'll take the Mustang." I spent 14 months rebuilding it. I said, "Not happening." A week later, the title was gone. So as a 24-year-old boy, I've spent my whole life living in my brother's shadow. My younger brother, 21-year-old Lucas, has always been treated as if he were God's gift to humanity, and I am essentially the invisible kid who no one cares about. It has been like way since we were little. I clearly recall winning first place in the district science fair when I was in ninth school. I spent weeks developing this awesome solar-powered water filtering system. When I returned home with the blue ribbon, my mother just murmured, "That's nice, dear," and returned to assisting Lucas in creating a poster for his social studies assignment, which was due the next day. He received a B- on it, and they treated him to ice cream to commemorate his hard work. Christmas was always a total farce in our household. Lucas' pile of presents would reach the ceiling. All the latest gaming gear, the greatest clothing, and everything else he'd been moaning about for the previous 7 months. My pile consisted of whatever was inexpensive, a flannel shirt if I was lucky, and the rare item that was genuinely beneficial for my endeavor. Mom would say practical presents with a smug smile on her face, as if she earned a medal for purchasing me work gloves while Lucas received a Nintendo. Dad was usually in the backyard with Lucas, teaching him how to toss a football or helping him create scientific projects. I'd be in the garage alone, watching YouTube videos to learn how to fix things since no one had time to teach me. When I asked Dad for help, he always said, "In a minute." A minute that somehow stretched into years. I eventually stopped asking. The golden child BS extended much beyond gifts and attention. Lucas would physically ruin Mom's car and they'd just brush it off. "Accidents happen, honey." I'd arrive home 7 minutes after curfew from working a late shift at the hardware store and be grounded for 3 weeks. Different world, different rules when you're the favored. When we were 17 and 15, Lucas went through a phase when he would borrow my belongings without asking. He once took my iPod to school, back when they were still popular, and some student stole it from his backpack. When I became upset, my parents advised me to be more sympathetic because he is going through a difficult time right now. The bottom line is that he did not make the JV basketball team's first string. They never replaced it, but Lucas received a fresh new one 3 weeks later since he needed music for his exercises. I realized quite quickly that nobody in our house had my back but me. So I shut up, lowered my head, and worked my ass off. I got my first job washing dishes at a greasy spoon cafe. I saved every penny and began studying skills via YouTube and the old folks at the hardware shop, where I ultimately found work. I didn't need their approval anyhow. My parents had a blind spot that perfectly matched my size and form. They'd remember to get Lucas's favorite cereal but forgot I was sensitive to peanuts. They'd drive 5 hours to witness Lucas's regional baseball game, but couldn't bring themselves to attend my high school graduation since it was such a long event and parking would be a headache. It sounds like I'm making this stuff up, but I promise I'm not. It's as if I'm a supporting role in a bizarre sitcom that no one remembers. Then, oh yeah, there's another kid too. My son. The truth is that Lucas was just as awful as my parents in his own way. He is entitled, greedy, and smug about his status as a golden kid. He repeatedly rubbed it in my face. "Mom said yes to me, but she'd probably say no to you," Dad used to say with a chuckle when I was younger. Or he'd accidentally smash my belongings and then play innocent when I got furious. By the time we reached high school, I had pretty much accepted my place in the family hierarchy. Keep your expectations modest so you do not be disappointed. So I concentrated on things I could control. My grades, occupations, friends and projects. So here comes my grandfather, a 74-year-old man. Grandpa Frank was the only person who ever actually saw me. Ironically, he was my father's father, a former Marine and old-school technician capable of stripping an engine blindfolded if necessary. He was a legend with his hands. While my parents were busy cheering on Lucas's soccer games or fretting over his school performances, I'd be in Grandpa's garage learning how to change oil, replace spark plugs and eventually rebuild carburetors. Those were the days when I felt like someone cared about me. "You got something special in those hands, boy," he'd say as we worked side by side on whatever beater he was cleaning up. "Your father never had the tolerance for this crap. Always too busy pursuing the next promotion, the next great thing." He shook his head, as if unsure where he went wrong with his kid. Grandpa saw right through my folks' partiality nonsense. My parents once forgot my 16th birthday. Like, I completely forgot. They recalled the day before that Lucas had a swimming competition the next day and the entire family had to go. My mother remarked, "Oh, it's your birthday tomorrow, isn't it? We'll celebrate next weekend." They didn't even bring me a cake. When Grandpa discovered out, he was furious. He arrived at our place that night with a toolbox covered in newspaper. Inside came a stunning pair of precision screwdrivers that I'd been coveting for months. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he announced loudly enough for my parents to hear from the kitchen. Some are worth celebrating properly. Every Christmas, as I opened my parents' utilitarian gifts, socks, school supplies, etc., Grandpa would slip me something real. Quality tools. Most of it I still use today. One year my folks grumbled about it. My mother had the audacity to comment, "He doesn't need to be spoiled, Frank." As if a nice set was akin to the new iPhone Lucas had just gotten. Grandpa just gazed at her like she was an idiot. "Recognizing talent isn't spoiling. It's investing," he said, winking at me. When I was 19, Grandpa was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Unfortunately, the news is not good. He couldn't drive anymore, so he contacted me one week and said he had something for me. They said it wasn't attractive, but it had nice bones. This was one of his favorite expressions. I drove over to his house, thinking he would be giving me some of his old tools or something. Instead, there was this 1968 Mustang fastback parked in his driveway, faded Highland green, with more rust than paint, ripped seats, and an engine that made sounds I didn't know a car could make. But holy hell, that was the most stunning sight I'd ever seen. Grandpa handed me the keys and said he had been keeping them for me since I was 13. He said he had seen how my parents treated me over the years and felt I deserved something special. He had intended to fix it himself, but as Parkinson's disease progressed, his hands no longer worked properly. "Your dad never appreciated muscle cars," he added, brushing his fingers over the rusting hood. "But you'll bring her back to life." I'm not going to lie, I had to step away for a moment. I got something in my eye, or whatever. When I drove that rust bucket home, my folks chuckled when they spotted it in the driveway. When I informed my father about it, he didn't even glance up from his phone. Just remarked, "Don't waste your money on that death trap." My father was too preoccupied with this pile of garbage. A pile of junk? Nah. Now I understand what Grandpa was trying to tell me. Mom just grumbled about the oil spots on the concrete. When Lucas saw it, his eyes glowed like Christmas morning. "Wow, that's going to be so badass when it's fixed up," Grandpa exclaimed, despite the fact that he had never shown it to me. And for once, I felt like I possessed something he coveted. He couldn't just complain to our parents about it. For 14 months I dedicated every spare minute to that automobile. Following rent and food, every paycheck was spent on parts. I learned how to weld and repair an engine by watching countless YouTube videos and reading forums. My hands were permanently coated with grease, my fingernails were never totally clean, and my arms were covered in minor burns and scratches. My room was packed with Chilton manuals and wiring diagram printouts. I'd fall asleep thinking about valve timing, then wake up, contemplating bodywork. When things went bad at home, as they always did, I'd go to the garage and bury myself in the restoration. Working on vehicles has an almost meditative quality to it. When you enter the zone, it's just you and the machine. Everything else melts away. I sourced parts from junkyards, swap meetings, and internet forums, rebuilt the 428 V8 piece by piece, sandblasted the body down to bare metal, and meticulously repaired the rust patches, learning to weld and shape metal along the way. I painted in my buddy's uncle's shop after hours. I traded work for booth time, completely reupholstered the inside. The day I finally got that engine to operate properly, hearing the deep rumbling of the V8 come to life, it seemed like everything I'd worked for had finally paid off. The Highland green paint shone in the sunlight. Yes, I choose the bullet color. Sue me. The black leather upholstery smelt like a fresh start. And when I took her for her first real drive, windows down, engine growling, I realized that for the first time in my life, I truly owned something. Something I constructed with my own two hands that no one could claim credit for. She was my success, and no one could take that away from me. Growing up as the overlooked kid teaches you to accept that others don't actually want your goods. Nobody fought over borrowing my clothing or playing with my games, since in their opinion, Lucas always had the superior version. So I was surprised by what happened when, for the first time in my life, I had something worth envying. And wow, Lucas envied that Mustang. So after I had the Mustang operating correctly, Lucas couldn't stop raving about it. Every time I drove it, he'd be at the window, staring like a kid at an ice cream truck. When I pulled in, he'd dash out to the garage. "Can I sit in it for just a minute?" At first, I didn't mind too much. It was good to have someone recognize all of my efforts. My folks didn't care. Dad simply moaned about equipment taking up room in the garage, while Mom continued making passive-aggressive remarks about squandering money rather than investing for a true future, whatever that meant. But then Lucas's request became increasingly bothersome. It changed from, "Can I sit in it?" to, "May I drive it to prom for one night? I'll be very careful." Then it was, "Let me take it to the beach this weekend." "My friend would freak if I picked him up in this," he said, his voice full of arrogance. Of course I would say yes, since that is what everyone has always done with Lucas. I always declined, not because I wanted to be a jerk to my brother. I replied no since I knew Lucas. This is the youngster who broke 4 phones in a single year. The child who borrowed his father's costly golf clubs for one afternoon and somehow lost half of the set. The child who never cared about anything since he didn't have to. Something was usually replaced when he broke it. He didn't have to be held accountable for anything since of course my parents had his back. And you think I'm insane for letting him drive my beautifully restored vintage Mustang after witnessing that track record his whole life? Hell no. The anxiety continued building. Lucas would roll his eyes when I declined, saying things like, "It's just a car, dude. You're so crazy anxious. Just an automobile. Just a car." As if I hadn't spent 14 months and every spare cash repairing the darn thing. Then my parents started making these small comments at dinner, like, sharing is part of being a good brother, and that car usually sits in the garage. Anyway, we have a conventional layout at our house. What Lucas wants, he gets. Except this time, I wouldn't budge. My father attempted to guilt trip me one night. "When I was your age, I was often sharing with my brothers. That's what family does." I nearly laughed in his face. This is from the guy who physically hid the excellent food in his office so he wouldn't have to share them with his children. I just answered, "When you were my age, did you rebuild a classic car from the ground up with money you earned while working your ass off in college?" That silenced him for approximately 7 minutes. My mother attempted a different angle. She cornered me in the kitchen one morning, holding her coffee cup and giving me that false, worried face. "Honey, I'm afraid about you becoming too tied to material possessions. It's only metal and rubber. Relationships are what count in life." It's interesting that they worry about keeping a solid connection with Lucas. Things came to a head when Lucas was accepted to State University. My parents prepared a huge party and invited everyone they knew. I mean, excellent for him, but State isn't Harvard. It's a respectable institution with a 65% admission rate. But he barely got in due to his terrible grades and Dad's alumni connection, so whatever. I showed up and complimented him. During supper, Dad stood up and revealed that they had a surprise for Lucas. Dad began talking about how Lucas would need transportation to campus, which was approximately 45 minutes away, and then looked directly at me, stating they felt I should allow Lucas use the Mustang while he was at school. The entire table turned to look at me, expecting me to smile and play along as usual. Like I was about to respond, "Sure, take the car. I spent 14 months repairing the one possession I own that meant something to me." "No problem at all." I just answered, "No, that's not happening." They all responded as if I had suggested we sacrifice the family dog. There was dead stillness at the table. Dad attempted to smooth things up by stating we'd talk about it later, but I shut that down as well. I told him there wasn't much to discuss. That was my automobile. This is the end of the narrative. Mom jumped in, telling me not to be selfish, since Lucas needed reliable transportation at this critical period in his life, as if college was somehow more essential than, I don't know, my entire existence. I ordered them to purchase him a car just like they did with everything else he requested. That's when Dad became enraged, slapped his hand on the table, nearly knocking over the gravy bucket, and claimed I was being foolish about a vehicle. I stepped up and finally spoke what I had been keeping in for years. I told him it was my car, that I rebuilt myself, that I had the title for, that I paid for with my own money, and that I wasn't handing it to Lucas just because he asked for it. I told them that for once in their life, they could say no to their lovely golden kid. He suggested Lucas understand what it's like to struggle for something rather than have everything delivered to him on a silver platter. Mom glanced at me, as if she couldn't believe I was sticking up for myself. Dad looked like he was about to rupture a blood vessel. Lucas merely sat there with that grimace, undoubtedly annoyed that his regular want-what-I-get approach had encountered a stumbling block. I left before anyone could say anything else. The next morning, Dad tried again. He attempted a new approach this time. "Listen, son," he began, as though we were discussing a deal. "I know you've put a lot of work into that automobile. What if we compensated you for this? We could put some money toward another project car for you to work on while Lucas drives the Mustang. He needs it right now." I just chuckled. "You don't understand, do you? It's not about money. I do not want another project vehicle. I want my automobile, which I have previously restored. And don't repeat the phrase 'it's just a car,' because it isn't. It means far more to me than that." Then he attempted to be selfish again. "Lucas has an opportunity here. This has the potential to significantly increase his chances of success. Don't you want the best for your brother?" I was so sick of that line. "How about what is best for me, Dad? Has that ever crossed your mind?" The expression on his face spoke everything I needed to know. It actually hadn't. Things at home remained strained for several weeks. My mother used the quiet treatment, as if I were the one being unreasonable. My father continued making small jabs about team members and family sacrifice. Lucas alternated between pouting and attempting to cheer me up with his unexpected brotherly interest in my life. I simply kept my head down, concentrating on my studies and job. I spent as little time at home as possible. I really considered obtaining my own apartment, despite the fact that rent in our neighborhood was exorbitant. But I began planning. I believed they'd ultimately get over it and get Lucas a car like any other parent would, one that they could afford. But they didn't want to, since why invest money when they could get my automobile for free? After 10 days, I received a call from my aunt in Michigan. "Grandpa Frank's health has taken a severe decline. Parkinson's disease was worsening, and at a routine exam, physicians discovered several other concerns. They were concerned about heart issues. Apparently, I panicked and decided to go up to Michigan to visit him. It was roughly a 7-hour journey, and I planned to remain for a long weekend. I told my parents I was leaving, despite the fact that we had scarcely spoken since the dinner dispute. Mom simply nodded and told them to offer Grandpa his love. Dad grumbled something about me skipping work. Classic. I was irritated because they didn't care about Grandpa. My friend Mason, who has always enjoyed my grandfather's stories, was aware of the trip. He became sad for him and offered to drive with me. "I've been eager to see this great man," he explained. "I considered taking the Mustang, but Michigan roads in late spring are sheer horror, with potholes the size of kiddie pools from winter freeze-thaw cycles. I didn't want to risk damaging the recently rebuilt undercarriage. Furthermore, Mason's truck had greater heat, and Michigan was still cold in May, so we took that instead." When we arrived in Michigan, my whole demeanor altered. Grandpa was in bad shape. Seeing this powerful old Marine who used to carry me on his shoulders, now hardly able to handle a coffee cup, truly upset me. His body was failing him, but his intellect remained keen as ever. "Did you take your time coming here?" When we came in, he muttered and smirked, letting me know he was kidding. We sat down with him, and he began giving us war stories and historical tales, which Mason thoroughly enjoyed. It was nice to see Grandpa happy again, even if just for a moment. Mason had to return after the first weekend for work, but I opted to remain longer. Grandpa's condition was worse than I had anticipated, and I wanted to be present. I slept on a cot in his assisted living facility room, supported him in moving, and ensured he ate appropriately. We had several nice conversations throughout those nearly 3 weeks. He inquired about the Mustang, of course. I showed him photos of the completed restoration on my phone, and his eyes lighted up. "Damn, buddy, you did well. Really fantastic job. I am proud of you, kiddo." Then he asked about my parents and Lucas. Saw right through my hazy responses. "Aren't they giving you crap about that car?" I nodded. I told him about Lucas wanting it for college and the major battle. Grandpa simply shook his head. "Your father never understood the importance of working with your hands. I've always wanted the easy way." He then looked me full in the eye. "Don't give in. Do you hear me? That automobile is yours. You constructed it. You keep it," I promised him. After almost 3 weeks, Grandpa had stabilized enough that I felt comfortable returning home. The nurse had an excellent schedule with him, and my aunt visited him every day. I took the Greyhound bus back. It was a long, unpleasant journey, and I was fatigued. When I arrived at our town's bus terminal, I ordered an Uber to drive me home because no one in my family offered me a ride. despite the fact that I texted my estimated arrival time. When I pulled into our driveway, something seemed strange right away. The Mustang was not in the garage where I had parked it. I assumed my father had relocated it to work on his own project vehicle, so I looked everywhere, including the street, parking lot, and side yard. Nothing. I raced inside and discovered my mother in the kitchen. "Where is my car?" I demanded. She startled as if astonished to see me and quickly tried to change the conversation. "Oh, you are back. How's your granddad doing?" "Where is my Mustang?" I repeated, not allowing her to deflect. She refused to meet my gaze. She became quite interested in the dish she was drying. "Lucas transported it to college. He needed an automobile for school. And since you were gone..." My blood ran cold. "He drove my car to campus after I said no to everyone." "Are you serious?" Dad walked in, and I could tell by the look on his face that he understood what was going on. "Now listen," he began in his courtroom voice. "We tried to call you but reception was spotty up there." I fired back. "I had a signal the entire time. I texted you every day with updates on Grandpa. You didn't call because you knew what I was going to say." Dad carried on. "Look, what's done is finished. Lucas needs the car more than you do right now. So what am I doing? Just existing. That is my car. I'm heading to campus right now to get it." "That might be difficult," Dad said. "The title has been transferred legally. Lucas now owns the car." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. "You did what?" "I swear my brain captured a screenshot." He said it in a way that suggested he was discussing the weather. "It just makes more sense for him to have it right." "Did you transfer my title? How in the hell did you do that without my signature?" They exchanged a look that revealed everything I needed to know. "So, about that. We forged your signature." "Are you really kidding me? That is illegal." "Don't be so dramatic," Mom snapped, finally giving up the sweet act. "We're your parents. We were simply making the right decision." I pulled out my phone and began dialing. "Who are you calling?" Mom inquired, suddenly nervous. "The police." Dad lunged forward, grabbing my phone. "Do not be stupid, you're going to regret it." I looked at them. They were already boiling. "Yes, someone will regret this. But it will not be me." I took my phone back and walked out. I called Mason, and he immediately came to pick me up. "What happened, dude? You look like you saw a ghost." I told him everything. "What the actual hell?" was all Mason could say at first. I crashed on his couch that night, too angry to even consider returning home. I kept picturing Lucas driving my car around campus, flaunting it like he owned it, and my parents believing they'd gotten away with it. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Mason's father, Richard, returned home late from work. Fortunately, he is a lawyer. Mason told him what had happened, and then he joined us. He told me that what they did was clearly illegal. Grand theft, auto forgery, and fraud are all felonies. But he warned me that I should think carefully about whether I want to go down this road with my family because they could face serious consequences. But guess what? I had no loss to give. Allow them to face whatever hell was coming because they deserved it. That night, my phone was flooded with texts from my parents, all variations of, "Come home so we can talk about this. You're overreacting, and family comes first." I ignored them all and slept, knowing I was about to teach them a lesson. That is when Operation Takedown began. The following day, the first stop was the DMV, the most boring place on the planet. But man, was it worth the 3-hour wait? I requested records of the Mustang's title transfer. Sure enough, there it was. My signature on the transfer papers was dated precisely when I was sitting in a hospital room in Michigan with Grandpa. I also obtained copies of the original title, which showed that the car was legally mine since Grandpa signed it over. Next, I went through all of my files at home while my parents were at work. I had always kept meticulous records for the Mustang restoration. I had every receipt, every before and after photo, and every piece of evidence that it was my project from the start. I had the original bill of sale from Grandpa to me. I even received texts from my parents acknowledging that it was my car project. Then Richard suggested we get proof that I was in Michigan when the title transfer occurred. This was the clever part. I went to my bank and obtained ATM camera footage that showed me taking cash from a Michigan ATM on the same day the transfer. Documents were signed. I was about zero point 0.2 miles away from the DMV when my signature appeared on the paperwork. While everything was going on, my phone was constantly blowing up. My parents left frantic voicemails that began with wrath. "How dare you not answer our calls?" Complete indignation turned to shame. "We're so worried about you." Finally, they settled on manipulation. "If you love your brother, you'll come home and we can work this out as a family." I didn't answer to anything. I was finished chatting. This was much beyond anything a family reunion could resolve. With all of the proof in hand, Richard and I headed to the police station to report grand theft, auto forgery, and fraud. Walking out of that police station seemed like I had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just accepting whatever garbage my family wanted to dole out. I fought back. The wheels of justice moved slowly, but they did spin. It took them roughly a month to address my concern. My parents' attempts to reach me have escalated during the last 4 weeks. The messages were increasingly frantic. "Stop being dramatic and come back home immediately." And "You're tearing the family apart for a crappy car." And my particular favorite, "You're making a mountain out of a molehill." They took my automobile, faked my signature on legal documents, and intimidated me when I confronted them about it. But, yes, I was overreacting. I kept myself occupied during those weeks. I worked additional shifts at work, helped Mason's father around the home to thank them for letting me remain, and began looking for my own apartment, deciding it was finally time to break away from my family's BS. After almost a month of silence from the police, the detective phoned. "We're moving on your case," he said. "Officers are on their way to your brother's dorm to recover the vehicle." As I hung up, my pulse pounded. It was really occurring. I was partly certain the officers would just dismiss it as a family affair. But when the officers arrived at Lucas's hostel to reclaim the Mustang, it was not there. According to his roommate, Lucas took it to a friend's house for safekeeping after receiving concerned texts from our parents. Because obviously, he had. That's when things became extremely serious. What began as a family squabble quickly escalated into a criminal probe. The cops traced the automobile to a storage place approximately an hour away from school. The flat was rented under a false name, but they tracked the payment back to my father's credit card, where they discovered my Mustang under a tarp with the VIN plates already removed. The detectives claimed it was obvious proof that they intended to either sell it illegally or make it disappear forever. Removing VIN plates is a criminal in and of itself. The following day, Lucas was arrested in his room for receiving stolen stuff and conspiracy. My parents were arrested at work and accused with forgery, fraud, and tampering with evidence. The local newspaper published a piece titled, "Family Charged in Classic Car Theft Scheme." There was even a photo of my parents being led into court for their arraignment. My phone practically burst after that. Relatives I hardly knew called to inquire what the heck was going on. High school pals were messaging to see whether the reports were real. My parents, now desperate, were phoning hourly with sobbing appeals to dismiss the charges in their wildest dreams. "This will ruin Lucas's future," Mom wailed on one voicemail. "He could go to jail. Is this what you want for your brother?" Another from Dad. "You are a complete jerk. The legal expenses are depleting our finances. We could lose our house." I did not call back. Not once. They had made their decision when they thought stealing from me was acceptable. Now they were sucking it up. My extended family had divided. Some people were outraged by what my parents had done, including my aunt in Michigan. Naturally, others sided with my parents. My mom's sister left me a nasty message about how I was ruining the family over a silly automobile. I didn't respond. What was the point? Despite the uproar, I remained calm, as if nothing they said or did could touch me anymore. I'd spent my entire life as the nice child, the sensible one, the one who swallowed it up and coped with whatever injustice came my way. And where had that led me? Nowhere. The most startling call came from Lucas at the county prison. He seemed desperate, which was unlike his normal confident tone. He began by claiming that everything was a misunderstanding, and that he assumed I was okay with his having the automobile since our parents had stated so. I stopped him off right then and ordered him not to lie. He knew precisely what he was doing since I warned him directly at dinner that he would never have my automobile. After a moment he confessed it. He stated he assumed I wouldn't file charges since families stick together or something like that. He wrote, "My father claimed it wasn't a big deal because they're my parents, and that the car was a waste on me anyway, because I just worked on it instead of driving it somewhere worthwhile. Pure entitled BS, but precisely what I've faced with my entire life. Then he had the arrogance to beg me to dismiss the charges because they were going to ruin his life. I just chuckled, welcomed him to the world of consequences, and hung up. As the investigation progressed, I received regular updates from the detective. The evidence was overwhelming, he stated. The prosecution was certain they had a good case based on the falsified signature, ATM footage confirming I was out of state, and the removal of the VIN plates. Your parents' attorney has reached out about a plea deal, the detective informed me. They want to make this go away. I believe they did. But it wasn't going away. Not this time. Edit 1. I didn't anticipate this to draw so much attention. Thank you, everyone. Edit 2. For those who have requested an update, I will provide one as soon as possible. Things are a little messy right now, so please pardon me till I am free. So here's a roundup. Hello Reddit. It's been a little over a year since my initial article went viral, and many of you have messaged me asking for an update. And let me tell you, there is a lot to say, so buckle up. So the judicial system is sluggish as hell, but it gets there eventually. Over the following few months, I observed from a distance as my family's pristine image crumbled. It turned out that the prosecution was not interested in any plea negotiations. Lucas received a felony conviction for grand theft auto and tampering with evidence. Was sentenced to 10 months in county prison, 4 years probation, and 600 hours of community service. When the conviction was announced, State University dismissed him immediately. No appeals and no second chances. My parents did not fare much better. Dad was charged with forgery, fraud, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. Mom faced the same accusations because it was shown that she was the one who faked my signature. They were both sentenced to 24 months probation, huge penalties, and 45 days in county prison, which the court refused to let them serve on weekends despite their requests. Dad lost his accounting job. It turns out that corporations dislike having convicted fraudsters around to handle money. Their immaculate reputation was entirely shattered. In addition to the criminal accusations, the civil suit I brought with Richard's assistance impacted them hard. They had to sell their home to pay court expenses and damages. Last I heard, they were living in a squalid apartment and barely making ends meet. They attempted to declare bankruptcy to avoid the civil judgment, but the court refused them. They made one final attempt to contact us via their court-appointed counsel. I offered to take out a second mortgage on the property they were already selling to pay for the car and more if I just dismissed the charges. Said we were still a family and could overcome this. I returned one line through Richard. We stopped being a family when you picked Lucas over me for the final time. The Mustang was finally removed from the storage container. The court ordered that it be returned to me, plus damages for attempted theft and mental anguish. It returned with a damage in the fender and other scuffs, but nothing I couldn't repair. While all of this legal crap was going on, I had been staying with Mason and his family, but I realized I needed a more permanent answer. I wasn't just looking to move out, I wanted to get out of that harmful atmosphere totally. So I made my selection. I packed up all I had, which was not much. It's amazing how little you need when you start new. I resigned my job and came to Michigan to live with Grandpa Frank. His Parkinson's was not improving, and he required more continuous care than my aunt could provide with her work and children. It was truly the finest decision I'd ever made. I transferred my community college credits to a nearby school and began working part-time at a local vehicle restoration company, where they valued my abilities. The first weekend after I moved here, I took the Mustang up to see Grandpa. He seemed really exhausted. The sight of him crushed my heart. I assisted him to the parking lot so he could see the car well in the sunshine. He brushed his shaking palm across the fender. The smile on his face was adorable. He was ecstatic that I moved in with him. Living with Grandpa for a few months was the finest thing that could have happened to both of us. I'd help him with everything, even cooking his meals, while he sat at the kitchen table giving me advice on compression ratios and valve timing. We'd watch classic westerns together in the evening, him falling asleep halfway through but insisting I tell him how they ended anyhow. After Grandpa's health deteriorated, my parents attempted several visits. He declined to see them. He claimed he didn't want to see those two hypocrites. Grandpa passed away roughly 7 months after I moved into his home. He passed away quietly in his sleep. I was with him last night, telling him about the 1970 Charger that the shop had just taken in for restoration. I wept for him. Still do. My family attended the funeral. Lucas looked like horrible following his time in county jail. My parents seemed worn down and aged. I maintained my distance even when they attempted to converse. I didn't trust myself to say something that wouldn't cause a scene. And Grandpa deserved more than that. On his last day after the funeral, I was astonished to see that Grandpa had left me everything: his home, tools, and small funds. My father appeared to have been smacked when the lawyer read the will. I guess he was banking on an inheritance to aid with their financial issues as a result of the legal turmoil. The lawyer then handed me an envelope containing a letter from Grandpa. The letter began with, "To my real son." He stated that the last several months with me were the happiest he'd been in years. He even asked that I maintain the Mustang running smoothly. I couldn't help it. I sobbed when I read it. I still kept the note in the Mustang's glove compartment. Still in Michigan, living at Grandpa's home. I've made some good friends, have a job I enjoy, and my future seems promising. Every Sunday when the weather is nice, I take the Mustang for a long drive along the coastal roads near the lake we drive on. My relatives called me several times, pleading for assistance. I always blocked them and told them to go to hell. The door is closed and secured.